We're going to wrap up this week of Locked On Utah Hockey Club. We're going to talk rivalries. Who could possibly be Utah HC's biggest rival heading into their inaugural season? We're going to talk why these teams will be or will not be the number one rivals. That's on today's episode, Locked On Utah Hockey Club.
You are Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your number one daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club. I'm your host, Robyn Leonio, alongside Tom Callahan. I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every single day. We are free and available everywhere you get your shows, including on YouTube as well, if you like watching and seeing our faces while we're talking hockey. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We got a little bit of pre-recorded show for you guys, because a lot of you guys know by the time you guys are listening to this, I will be getting ready to play my first game in Minnesota. So, but I decided, you know what? I don't want to leave you guys empty without content, so might as well get talk some Utah Hockey Club while I'm away, Tom. And what better way to do it and then talk about potential rivalries for the Utah Hockey Club. And this is going to be a two-parter, by the way, to everyone. It's going to be a two-parter. In this first part, we're going to discuss 5 teams and why they will be potentially Utah's number one rival. Part 2 will be coming later over the weekend, and we'll be discussing why they won't be the number one rival. So we're going to pick the same 5 teams, Tom, kind of discuss those 5 teams, and we'll see what this conversation takes us, because I think there's a lot of ways that I think a solid 5 teams you could really make good arguments for.
I think we could probably go through the entire Western Conference and try to make a case either way. There's a lot of links and a lot of ways to get to different teams, and certainly we're going to try to whittle that all down. Before we get into that, Robyn, I do want to say I did a little bit more experimenting with my digital personal assistant tracking of our podcasts. So as it turns out, your Echo device, if you have one, and I'm sure other personal assistants will do the same thing. Now I have it trained to not only can I set it as my alarm in the morning, not only will it go ahead and play it when I ask for it, but it is now set to tell me when a new episode releases. So you can also do that. If you have not set a reminder for when our episodes come out, and I mean, I know you have, but I'm just speaking to maybe a first timer here. It's really cool to be able to have that alert set and be told, hey, there's new content here when we're talking about the Utah Hockey Club. So that's very exciting. And this is going to be a fun show today.
Oh, it really is going to be a fun show. Because I love talking about rivalries, right? Because, I think that's kind of what makes being a hockey fan fun. One of the big things that makes being a hockey fan fun is having a team that you collectively as a fan base just, for whatever reason, just despise, right? And it's just, but out of the fun of it, not necessarily sure, you can truly, truly hate a team, and that we have those, and those teams, those kinds of rivalries exist. But the ones that you're just that you love to hate, right? You know, the teams that you love to hate.
I think there's always good reasons to have them, whether it's geographic, whether it's just an obnoxious fan base that you would like to see lose. There's a whole lot of reasons why. And I mean, you think of the great rivalries out there, things that come to mind in hockey. Certainly, I think for me, the first one that comes to mind is Maple Leafs Canadiens. Mm-hmm. That's a big one. And those two teams love to see each other lose. In baseball, you have Yankees, Red Sox, Cubs, Cards, really the Dodgers and the entire West Coast. There's a lot of different things, but there's a reason for that, right? I mean, the chant at Diamondbacks games is beat LA. That's what they want to do is beat, LA. And so there's reasons for that. And of course the NBA, it used to be Lakers Celtics. And that was a big one back in the 80s when I was a kid. And there's so many different awesome rivalries, but Utah is a new page in this book. And so my grounds for a rivalry, I think before we even talk about teams, here's what is important to me in a rivalry. Number one, I do think geography can play into it, especially in the beginning, because you're a brand new fan base. So I think geography is relatively important. The rivalries really develop into playoffs. And so I think Utah Hockey Club fans will find their rivals in the playoffs. But so we don't have that element yet. Okay, so we have geography, but not the playoffs. The other thing about a rivalry is it can't be one-sided. Because as someone, when I worked for the Preds, they had what were considered two main rivals. One was the Columbus Blue Jackets because they were expansion twins, but the Predators just beat the Blue Jackets all the time, and it wasn't much fun. And so the fan base is really, it becomes more an apology every time you play the other team. The other one was the Red Wings. And the reason Nashville had a big rivalry with the Red Wings is because there was a Chevy plant, used to be a Saturn plant, just outside of Nashville. And so a lot of those fans are what we call Pred Wing fans. So they were Preds fans until the Red Wings came to town. Red Wings. But then finally the rivalry got going when Nashville got on par with Detroit and then finally beat them in a playoff series. That was really when the rivalry kicked in. And then of course Detroit went to the East and it died. But it's just that, to me, those are important elements to it. So I think we've got 2 out of the 3 here, starting off for Utah before we even talk playoffs. But I think it's a good start, and geography is a very easy one to start with.
Yeah, let's start with geography, and might as well start with the first team. I think a lot of people have been discussing as a possible main rival, Tom. And so number 1 in the Colorado Avalanche. They're just in the state right next door. A lot of people are going to be certainly one of the biggest things that's going to be discussed on that. Plus, with the rumors of the name, there are some Colorado fans I know who are probably going to be upset about the quote Yeti. You can make whatever arguments you want. Plus, there's a lot of other ways it can go down. But that's a good start. Talk about the Colorado Avalanche.
And I actually think the Avalanche are going to be one of my odds-on favorites to really kind of spark something here, because Colorado is now not the class. Here's the other thing. Oh, too, I forgot to mention, it's better if they're in the division. They don't have to be, but it's better if they're in the division.
100%.
So Colorado is in the division, and I think Colorado is in an interesting space right now where they believe their window is open, and certainly they have the talent to have an open window, but they have some cap issues. They have some injury issues. So they have a lot of things that they are trying to figure out to even get a healthy lineup, to make sure they know who's going to be out there night in, night out. But I mean, Nathan McKinnon has just been a beast. Cale Makar is amazing, but do they really have everything fixed up in net? So the reason I kind of talk about the Avalanche a little bit here, mountainous state, skiing, winter sports are big in both, Denver versus Salt Lake. I think it's a really good matchup there. But also, I think Utah has a chance to be even, or at least on a more level playing field, with a Colorado team that is good. So it gives you something to aspire to, but beatable. And I think that they'll, chalk up a couple of wins against this team this season, and it will spur things on.
I mean, and I think it's one of the really important things is, and now add another aspect to a rivalry is a little bit of history. You can't really take the record books, but since a lot of the players remain from the Arizona Coyotes to the Utah Hockey Club, there was a decent, slowly growing rivalry. Like at first, the Coyotes had no place playing against Colorado at all, but then Arizona would beat them a couple times, make some surprise wins, and you could see a little bit like the budding of a rivalry start to come out. Nothing really quite officially yet, But you can use that as a baseline. It's like, all right, something was started, and now that it's you kind of put into the other two factors that you mentioned, Tom, in geography, as well as being in the same division, in the Central Division, it adds a whole other aspect to it. It's like, okay, I feel like it just has a higher chance of now accelerating into a full-on rivalry.
Especially because Colorado is expected to be a top 3 team in the division this year. So it's right now it's Nashville, it's Dallas, it's Colorado. Those are your top 3 teams in the division. Everybody else is making moves, trying to get better, trying to improve. I think that Utah can have a hand in knocking Colorado down and maybe even making them sweat it into the wild card chase, leaving the door open for another improved team in the Central, maybe Winnipeg, to be able to creep in, and really Colorado might have to sweat it. Now, again, it depends. It's a long season. You don't know how injuries go, who has a breakout season, who just completely fades away. We don't know. But I feel like Utah can impact that race in the Central and will impact that race in the Central.
They certainly will. And I feel like, continuing to add, again, these are just, factors on factors of what makes a good rivalry. And that's just really the beginning of the conversation, Tom. We'll keep talking about this and then, talk about the other 4 teams we think can make good rivalries. And once again, as a part 1 of part 2, like coming out later this weekend, we'll talk why Colorado won't be, as well as the other 4 teams we'll be discussing. But we'll do that right after this.
And today's episode brought to you in part by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
So let's keep talking about these potential rivals, Tom, for the Utah Hockey Club for year 1. And I want to keep to start off, keep the theme of geography to start off with, because the next one is the Vegas Golden Knights. You have Salt Lake City, for a while, what used to be the television market for the Vegas Golden Knights for a few years. That plays a major factor. I'm pretty sure, Tom. Yeah.
Well, there's VGK fans sprinkled all over Utah. Two teams. I was kind of reading up on this, Robyn, in preparation for this. The 2 teams that kind of have a geographic foothold in Utah coming into it are the 2 most recent NHL teams, Vegas and Seattle. They both have fan bases in the Salt Lake area, well, in all of Utah, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the VGK stretch all the way up north towards the Canadian border. They really did a nice job, I will say, getting their games broadcast up northwards from Vegas and really trying to claim that northern Midwestern American market where there was that gap where Minnesota goes, west kind of through the Dakotas, but then it kind of falls off in there. So they did a nice job really trying to capitalize on that. Now Utah comes in as another regional option, let's say, for the rooting interest of fans. But what the Golden Knights have going for them is they're popular and they're successful. They've won a Stanley Cup. They've had, great players in that uniform. Marc-Andre Fleury is still one of my all-time favorites. I think they lucked out when they got him to help start that franchise. And they have a lot going for them as far as the persona of the team. In a way, though, they've kind of turned themselves into the evil empire. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it
Yeah.
might be a little easier to get some Utahns to kind of flip on them a little bit here.
Oh yeah, certainly. And I think there's that. Plus, like, again, now the state has a team to rally behind. It's going to be interesting to see where the boundary lines become, because there'll still be a boundary line within the state, right?
Sure.
Like, I'm sure Vegas is still going to try to claim St. George, right? Or much of southern Utah. They're going to be like, all right, yeah, this is our territory. And even more so, they're going to even try to add more, because I think their ECHL team is based out of Lake Tahoe in Nevada. So so who knows how close to the west, western Utah or northwestern Utah might even take. Hey, maybe we'll go there too. There will certainly be a territorial rivalry, that's for sure, and it'd be like like I said, I want to know where the boundary lines, because that's going to be an interesting one.
I think that there is a big civic pride in the state of Utah. Mm-hmm. Just the folks that I've had the chance to talk to interact with, they really are driven by being a part of something that is unique. So I'm thinking that there's a very good chance Utah Hockey Club captures a lot of the hearts and minds of the hockey fans in the state. But yeah, there's going to be some people who aren't just going to be so fast to toss their Golden Knights paraphernalia out to the curb, and they're going to run with that team. And for the first couple of years, they're going to be right. Now, obviously, they're not in the same division, so they don't play each other as much as if they were in the division. So that's going to be
the same conference.
But they are in the same conference, so they will see them a couple times a year. And I think that is one of the games to circle whenever Vegas comes to Utah. I really believe that UHC fans are going to show up and really try to drive the message home to Golden Knights fans. Hey, this is our team. We can be just as loud as you. We can have just as much fun as our arena as you.
It will certainly be a fun thing to watch. So Vegas Golden Knights is another possible option here. I want to move now, Tom, to another team that has had a historic rivalry, or at least has had, I wouldn't say call it historic rivalry, just has had bad blood history with of a lot of players on the Arizona Coyotes. So, the previous iteration, the previous team that this team came from, that's the Anaheim Ducks. There is no love lost between those two players. I know they hate each other, the guts.
Yeah, and I mean, they played each other all the time in the American League coming up, Tucson against San Diego. And
that's another thing to add too. Yeah. There's that. So there still is a geographic-esque angle to it if you look down that minor league aspect.
The one thing that, well, I guess I'll save this for the why it won't, so I'll save that reason. But so, yes, when you have bad blood, especially on the ice, when you have that built-in hatred between the teams, the games get physical and edgy. That promotes a rivalry. Yeah. When there's a buzz coming into the building in either place, whether you're going in Anaheim or you're going in Utah, and you feel that buzz, you're like, man, something could happen tonight, and it could be big. Like, this game could blow up. You just, as a fan, you get into that more, right? And you get more edgy and excited for it. So I think that, yeah, that could absolutely be a big reason if the Ducks are able to continue to grow and get better. And then, of course, Utah is looking to try to start its breakout now. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's poised with two really young teams that, I don't want to say they came up together, but almost it's kind of like, rival school kids. You're going from freshman to sophomore. By the time you get to senior year, you just really don't like those guys.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I'm looking at, like, I remember a lot of the commentary that was made, and I know the host of Locked On Ducks has a very colorful thoughts on the at the time Arizona Coyotes color commentator Tyson Nash, and essentially trash talking Trevor Zegras. And I mean, and again, I know a lot of Coyotes fans, even some of the old Coyotes players still had. That's where some of the bad blood comes from. Players like Zegras and other players out there who were part of that Ducks team while they were, while that rivalry was budding up. I'm curious to see how it will continue because now it's a completely different team technically. Again, same players but different team in Utah, and Anaheim now going in a different direction. I'll be curious to see where exactly goes. And again, we'll talk about the why it won't in a little bit, or later on this weekend. But I'm curious to see where it's going to go with that one.
Yeah, Anaheim could be interesting, especially they have a lot of young stars, and Utah has a lot of young stars. And when they kind of develop alongside one another, that has the potential to really, it's natural, human nature to want to just show that you're better than the guy on the other team, and that all by itself is going to promote competition and make it a little more fierce.
Absolutely. We got two more teams we're going to discuss as possible rivals and why they could be the number one rival for Utah Hockey Club going into the first season. We'll get to those right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app usually go down closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time that takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I've said it multiple times, and I'll say it again. Always love going to Arizona Diamondbacks, San Francisco Giants games, being alongside several fellow Giants fans who were taking over Phoenix. It's a really fun experience for me. Game Time has always been my place to buy those tickets. I always get those last minute deals, get a really good price on those tickets, can see my seat from the app so I can be comfortable to know that I'm going to get a good view. Plus, again, with their all-in pricing feature that I can toggle on, and all of a sudden I just see what the total price is after fees. So I don't get surprised by fees once I hit checkout. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So for the final two teams, Tom, I want to hear from you. I kind of already put, Swede, I think, and I think you have some agreements on some of those, but I want to hear two that you believe could potentially be number one rivals for Utah going into year one.
Well, I have a couple that could be on this list, but one of the ones that I'm going to throw out there is going to be Seattle, again, a Pacific Division team, but proximity and the fan creep into Utah for the Kraken, which I think the Kraken fans are the anti-Golden Knights fans. What's going to be fun is when Vegas comes to town, even if Kraken fans stay Kraken fans, they're still going to come in and root against Vegas. So, that's going to be a fun atmosphere all by itself. But the Kraken are a team that they're in a weird place. Let's be honest. They could make some moves to get better and become more solid. And at times they showed that they have, but then they fell back last year. They let go of their coach. So I think from a competitive basis, Seattle is one of those teams Utah needs to be in front of. And Seattle plays a blue collar brand of hockey, or at least they did. Hardworking team, physical team. That is the Utah Hockey Club. Utah Hockey Club operates from size and strength. They want to push other teams around. I think that is oil and water when it comes to the Kraken because they both want the puck and they both want to own all 200 feet of that rink. So to me, that really sets up for some intensity and a pretty good rivalry.
Oh, certainly. And I think there's also something to be said. And again, there's a difference between the new franchise-esque feeling that we're getting for Utah because they're just taking what was from Arizona. So there's no expansion draft versus an expansion team, but they're still, for all intents and purposes, the two newest teams on the ice. So there's going to be a little bit of battle on, essentially a battle for fans in a market like that, especially if you're trying to, let's say, add, again, you're looking outside your own state territory. where would that territory line be in, let's say, like Idaho, right? Like who's going to try to see if they can capture, the Boise or Idaho fans market, in terms of who's going to try to become, bring in those hockey fans.
Yeah, and I mean that's regionality will come into play. The Kraken being there beforehand definitely helps.
Certainly.
But I think that Utah has a chance to really kind of, as something new, put their mark out there. And let's face it, when you're new, you're hot. People are always attracted to the shiny new object. They're like barracudas. And that is exactly what's happening right now with the Utah Hockey Club. And we're pleased to be at the forefront. We're riding this wave as well, Robyn. I mean, we are dealing with a team that we're drawing folks who might not have been interested in hockey at all. They're listening to our show. And by the way, thank you for that. This is a big moment for Utah. And I think that Seattle is a team that they really, they share more than just the color blue. I think they share a blueprint. And when that is the case, I really feel like that's going to lay some fireworks on the ice, and that's entertaining for fans, and that breeds a rivalry.
Oh, certainly. And I think it will be really fun to watch and pay attention to see, where the trajectory goes for that one.
All right, so I'm going to move on to my last team here. I actually was trying to pick between a couple. I was looking at Nashville, I was looking at Winnipeg, and I have reasons. Nashville has elevated itself so much, though. I'm not entirely sure that that's going to fall in the wheelhouse in year one for Utah. So I'm going to
honorable mention.
Okay, yeah, we'll put honorable mention there. And Winnipeg, same thing. I think Winnipeg is a team that it's really hard to care about outside of the market until they come to your town. You're not reading up on them every week. You are, however, reading up every week on the Chicago Blackhawks. Obnoxious fan base. When they won their 3 Stanley Cups, and I love you Blackhawks fans, but you can be obnoxious, and you know this. And you've been humbled in recent years because it's been a long fall from grace. You've been in cap jail for a long time. The juggling was incredible for a very long portion of that time, but you're back down to earth now. So Chicago, however, has drafted high, has Connor Bedard, has a lot of star power, but it's young and developing, and they're trying to get themselves back to that. Look, the expectations in Chicago are sky high every year. And so it's easy for Utah fans to kind of get behind, let's beat Chicago, I think. I believe that they will be able to root against a divisional rival that they're going to see a lot, that really – the bullseye that Chicago has put out is on the teams in the bottom half of the Central Division: St. Louis, Minnesota, and Utah. These 4 teams, we're going to be scrapping it out all season long. But I think Chicago is going to be the one that's going to be the easiest to get behind, not liking when they come to town.
I mean, you can add the aspect that 99% of the rest of the National Hockey League doesn't like Chicago either, for one reason or another. It's an easy one to say to hate.
Yes,
that's for darn sure. And again, it's for a multitude of reasons. But I think you added the aspect that they're both kind of in a situation where they got the young guys who are growing, who are going to become a huge part of the franchise in the next few years. You mentioning Connor Bedard and seeing exactly what impact Chicago is going to make in 2-3 years down the road. I'm curious to see how that comparison. And again, we're talking about year one here, but so I would still count it. Where that trajectory versus the trajectory of your Logan Cooley or your Tisha Ginla.
Theoretically, Utah Hockey Club should be a step or two ahead of the Chicago Blackhawks.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically. So that is why you want to see your team beat that team all the time. Now, Chicago really is trying, just like everybody else is, but they're really trying to get better because the pressure is high. And so to put that target on Chicago for Utah Hockey Club, I think is important because those other teams I just mentioned, Minnesota, St. Louis, Chicago, are not easy outs, but those are the teams that this season you've got to be better than. Hands down, no questions asked. Then you can worry about breaking into the bottom 4 of the division and becoming a wild card team. But this year, the teams you need to be better than 90% of the time: St. Louis, Minnesota, and Chicago.
Oh yeah, I feel like those are gonna be the ones that are gonna be pay attention to the most. In terms of like you said, teams you want to be better than on any given case. Because that's the Central Division has a certain line of where you want to be, especially if you're a team like Utah, who's at a certain point in their rebuild where they should be at this level now. So we'll be curious to see, and I think that's definitely a good addition, a good name to put out, like another name to put out there with the Chicago Blackhawks. Any final thoughts before we close things off on this part 1 of our rivalry talk?
Well, I gave you my honorable mentions, or Winnipeg and Nashville. Do you have an honorable mention that I did not mention?
No, I feel like that. Like, to me, I feel like those are the ones that I would pay attention to. Maybe the only other one, and again, it kind of goes with talking about some of the a team that you mentioned that Utah should be beating, and it just goes with the territory of the star of the team and where they're from, and that's the St. Louis Blues. That's the only other one, because of Clayton Keller in St. Louis, and Clayton Keller just loves to run around St. Louis. That's about it. It's just fun to watch. But that's really the only one I can really think of. If I really wanted to, I could try to make an argument for San Jose now that they have a high draft pick, but they're not going to be competing anytime soon.
I think that savvy hockey fans are going to buy tickets to see the Sharks because they want to see Celebrini.
Of course.
But really, unless somebody has an incredible game like Celebrini, hangs a hat trick on you, that type of thing, you expect to come out of that with a win.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. That should be the expectation. But I think that covers it for the talking about those main 5 teams. What we're gonna do, Tom, is we're gonna take those same 5 teams and we're gonna play devil's advocate why those 5 teams shouldn't be the number 1 rival for the Utah Hockey Club going into year 1. So be sure to stay tuned for that. If you liked this episode, this part 1, don't forget to leave a review. Give us a like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your shows, including on YouTube, and just everywhere else you get your shows. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We are on X, Instagram, and Threads at LO_NHL Utah. We're on TikTok at LO_Utah Hockey. I am personally at Robyn with a Y _Leano, Leano. Tom Callahan is at Callahan on Air. Interact with us. Ask a question you might have. We might answer it back or in a future episode of the podcast. Don't forget to also join our Insider Text Club at 801-760-9033 to be part of this Insider Club. We get access to texting us one-on-one and just really be a part of that. It's going to be really fun. It's really a fun time, especially with the season coming closer and closer. Tom, exclusive content going to be coming your way all season long. But thanks again, everyone, for listening to this part 1, and we'll see you guys next time.